But what happens when company becomes the source of your greatest torment? Schopenhauer warned us, and today we will reveal who they are. We have all felt the weight of relationships that drain us, that leave us questioning our own sanity. Individuals who, consciously or unconsciously, undermine our inner peace and steal our tranquility day after day. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, with his relentless vision of human nature, identified patterns of behavior that inevitably lead to suffering. And no one embodied these abysses of the soul so viscerally as The Underground Man by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Born in 1788 in Danzig, Schopenhauer grew up observing humanity with disenchanted eyes. While his idealist contemporaries preached inevitable progress, he saw the raw reality behind social masks. In his work Parerga and Paralipomena, he dissects human relationships with the precision of a surgeon, revealing the wounds we prefer to ignore. Decades later, in 1864, on the other side of Europe, Dostoevsky published Notes from Underground, giving life to a character who seems to leap directly from the philosophical pages of Schopenhauer. The Underground Man, bitter, contradictory, and painfully self-conscious, is the literary mirror where we see reflected the human types that Schopenhauer warned us to avoid. But what makes this connection so profound? It is that both philosopher and writer recognized an uncomfortable truth. Often, hell is not others in themselves, as Sartre would say, but certain specific patterns of behavior that, when present in our relationships, become true poisons for the soul. The Underground Man confesses, "I am a sick man, I am a spiteful man, an unpleasant man." And in this brutal self-declaration, he not only diagnoses himself but also offers us a warning about what we become, or what others can make us, when certain toxic dynamics dominate our lives. Today, we will reveal 6 types of people who, according to Schopenhauer's wisdom, may be silently destroying your life. And we will see how the Underground Man serves as a mirror for these dynamics, showing both what we should avoid in others and what we should watch for in ourselves. Because, as Schopenhauer warned us, solitude offers the intellectual man 2 advantages: to be with himself and not to be with others. And sometimes, this conscious solitude is preferable to the company that drags us into the abyss of the underground of our own existence. For Schopenhauer, life is dominated by will, an irrational and incessant force that drives us, but rarely satisfies us. It is the root of selfishness and conflict. He argued that life oscillates like a pendulum between pain and boredom. This will is not just a conscious desire, but a metaphysical force that permeates all existence. It is the blind impulse to live, to pursue, and to want, always insatiable, always causing suffering. When we look at human behavior through this lens, we begin to see patterns that repeat themselves since time immemorial. Understanding this basis allows us to see toxicity not as pure evil, but often as manifestations of this unbridled will in others. It's as if certain people were completely dominated by it, without the counterweight of reason, self-reflection, or compassion that could balance its destructive force. In his writings on life wisdom, Schopenhauer offers us a map to navigate the labyrinth of human relationships, and the first step is to identify who we should keep at a distance. The first toxic type that Schopenhauer warns us to avoid is what we can call the inflexible egoist, the will itself incarnated in human form. For Schopenhauer, each being sees itself as the absolute center of the universe. As he wrote, each individual considers himself the center of the world. In the inflexible egoist, this natural tendency reaches extreme proportions. It is someone for whom the entire world, including you, exists only as a means to their ends. You recognize this type by their fundamental inability to see beyond their conversations always return to themselves. Their problems are always more important. Their perspective is always the one that should prevail. The empathy they demonstrate is calculated and instrumental, a means to get what they want. The most disturbing thing is the subtlety of this manipulation. It is rarely explicit. Instead, it manifests in small moments. When your feelings are invalidated, when your needs are consistently placed in the background, when you realize that you only receive attention when you are useful. The impact of living with an inflexible egoist is devastating. Gradually, you begin to doubt the value of your own needs. You feel emotionally drained, as if you were constantly giving without ever receiving. And the most insidious, you begin to normalize this imbalance, accepting crumbs of consideration as if they were feasts. Dostoevsky's Underground Man embodies aspects of this pathological ego. Observe how he analyzes each human interaction in terms of how it affects or diminishes him, how he wishes to dominate others, even if pathetically. As he writes, "I am alone, and they are all." His inability to see others as ends in themselves, and not as mere instruments of his internal drama, makes him a perfect example of this toxic type. Dostoevsky shows us this poignantly in the scene with Liza, the young prostitute. The underground man momentarily cares for her only to then humiliate her when he realizes she can see through his facade. His vulnerability turns into cruelty, wounded egoism reacting violently. Schopenhauer's warning is clear. Faced with the inflexible egoist, the only real protection is distance. As he advises us, limit our desires, restrain our will, subdue self-love. This is what protects us. But we cannot expect the inflexible egoist to do the same. Change rarely comes from outside. Schopenhauer's philosophy offers us a precious concept for dealing with these individuals: ataraxia, or tranquility of the soul. This state can only be achieved when we distance ourselves from those who are completely at the mercy of unbridled will, the inflexible egoists who transform each relationship into an exercise of domination. The second type that Schopenhauer warns us to avoid is the resentful envious, one whose gaze corrodes both themselves and others. For Schopenhauer, envy is the hell of the living, one of the darkest and most self-destructive passions of the human soul. It is born from constant comparison and the inability to find intrinsic value in one's own existence. As he wrote, "Envy is natural to man, and yet it is both a vice and a misfortune." The resentful envious suffers twice, first from their own lack, then from the abundance of others. It is the only emotion that doesn't even provide the momentary pleasure that other vices offer. It is pure suffering caused by the happiness of others. You recognize this type by deprecating comments disguised as jokes or concern. "Wow, how brave to wear that dress with your body type." Congratulations on the promotion. Of course, it helps to have connections in the company, doesn't it? They are small drops of poison served in cups of apparent cordiality. Even more subtle is sabotage. Advice that misleads, help that hinders, compliments that diminish. The resentful envious cannot genuinely celebrate the success of others. Each achievement of others is experienced as a personal defeat. Each joy of others as a reminder of their own dissatisfaction. The impact of living with the resentful envious is a slow erosion of self-confidence. Like water hitting stone, their constant insinuations and criticisms eventually open fissures in your perception of value. You begin to question your achievements, doubt your talents, diminish your joys. Demotivation sets in, because why make an effort if each success will be minimized or attributed to luck? The underground man is the perfect portrait of this resentment. His hatred for the officer who ignores him, moving him out of the way like an insignificant object, crystallizes into obsession. He fantasizes about humiliating those he perceives as superior, not for any real injustice, but simply because they exist in apparent comfort while he suffers. In a revealing moment, he declares, "I would be the first to decree that I be thrown into the well, just so that all others would feel unhappy too." This is the essence of the resentful envious. The need to level downward, to reduce the light of others instead of seeking one's own illumination. Schopenhauer's warning: the absolute futility of comparing ourselves with others. As he wrote, "We should not look around to see how it is, in general, the fate of men, but to see how ours has been." The philosophical antidote he proposes is to cultivate indifference to the opinions and fortunes of others as a form of self-protection. Faced with the resentful envious, wisdom lies in guarding your joys, protecting your achievements, and seeking validation from sources that have demonstrated the capacity to genuinely celebrate the fullness of others, not to corrode it. Before revealing the third toxic type, I extend a special invitation. Subscribe now to the channel and activate the bell. After all, recognizing these patterns is just the first step. The journey of self-knowledge we are treading together is continuous and helps us grow, and can profoundly transform your relationship and returning. The third type that Schopenhauer warns us to avoid is, surprisingly, the unrealistic optimist, one who denies the reality of suffering and, in doing so, paradoxically, amplifies it. For many, optimism seems an unquestionable virtue, but Schopenhauer saw in it a dangerous form of self-deception. In his essay, On the Suffering of the World, he wrote, "Optimism is, at bottom, the unjustified self-praise of the true author of the world, the will to live, which complacently contemplates its work." Unrealistic optimism is not just naivety, it is an active refusal to confront the tragic nature of existence. It is an escape that, by denying suffering, prevents its true transcendence. It's like putting a colorful bandage over an infected wound and declaring healing. You recognize this type by their toxic positivity. Everything happens for a reason. Think positive and problems disappear. Gratitude only. They are empty mantras that, in the face of real pain, sound like insults. The unrealistic optimist systematically minimizes others' problems. "Oh, that's nothing. You should see what my neighbor is going through." Their most harmful characteristic is the fundamental inability to deal with negative emotions, both their own and others. Disguised as strength, this emotional limitation is, in fact, a profound fragility. Each expression of sadness, anger, or despair is quickly pushed away, invalidated, or reconverted into a lesson or growth opportunity. The impact of living with the unrealistic optimist is profound emotional loneliness. You learn to hide your pains, to pretend that everything is fine, to repress what is authentic but uncomfortable. An internal division develops, a positive public face and an increasingly alienated interior. The pressure to always be well becomes an invisible prison. Curiously, the underground man represents the opposite extreme, a pessimism as pathological as the optimism we criticize. However, he offers a scathing critique of the unrealistic optimists of his time, the rationalists and progressives who believed that society was inevitably marching toward perfection. He sarcastically asked, "And what happens if one day we discover that 2 + 2 = 5 is sometimes more advantageous than 2 + 2 = 4? This is his rejection of the idea that rationality and progress would inevitably bring happiness, ignoring the irrational and tragic aspects of human existence. Schopenhauer's warning is that inconsequential optimism, by denying suffering as an intrinsic part of life, prevents true wisdom. For him, it is only by recognizing suffering that we can, paradoxically, transcend it. Not through denial, but through understanding, art, and compassion. As he wrote, "Our civilization is only a mask through which human nature, essentially wild and destructive, occasionally peers with threatening eye." Faced with the unrealistic optimist, wisdom lies in honoring the complexity of human experience, embracing both light and shadow as necessary parts of an authentic life. The fourth type to avoid, according to Schopenhauer, is the judging moralist, the modern Pharisee who uses morality not as a guide for compassion, but as a pedestal for superiority. Schopenhauer had profound contempt for ostentatious morality that serves only as an instrument of vanity. In The World as Will and Representation, he draws a crucial distinction between true virtue, based on genuine compassion, and performative morality that seeks only the admiration of others or social control. "Virtue cannot be taught," he wrote, "just as genius cannot be taught. For it, the concept is sterile, as it is for art, and can serve only as an instrument." The judging moralist, on the contrary, transforms morality into a rigid system of external rules, into a weapon to attack others while protecting himself. You recognize this type by their constant judgments disguised as moral concern. "I can't believe she's raising her child that way, poor child. He has always been a bit Morally flexible. They are small sentences pronounced from the height of an imaginary tribunal. Gossip about others' immorality is their favorite pastime. Each scandal, each failure, each deviation from the norm becomes an opportunity to reaffirm their own moral superiority. It is a game where others always lose and they always win, because the rules constantly change to ensure their advantage. Even more revealing are their double standards. The same behavior condemned in others is justified when practiced by themselves or their close ones. That situation was different. Context matters. Suddenly, the iron morality becomes flexible as rubber when applied to themselves. The impact of living with the judging moralist is the development of a chronic feeling of guilt and inadequacy. Under their scrutinizing gaze, you feel permanently lacking, as if carrying an unpayable moral debt. The fear of being judged becomes a constant presence, leading to self-censorship and loss of spontaneity. Or C. Although the underground man is not a traditional moralist, in fact, he despises the moral conventions of his time. He constantly judges others for his own frustrations and feelings of inferiority. He projects a kind of resentful anti-morality, where men of action are condemned not for being immoral, but for being simple and not tortured like him. In a revealing moment, he declares, "I am a sick man. I am a spiteful man." This self-declaration is not a humble confession, but a form of superiority. He places himself above others not by virtue, but by awareness of his own villainy. It is an inverted judgment, but a judgment nonetheless. Schopenhauer's warning is to be wary of those who loudly proclaim their virtue. As he observed, it is easy to preach morality, difficult to ground it. True morality, for him, does not come from external rules or judgments, but from genuine compassion, the ability to feel the suffering of others as one's own. Faced with the judging moralist, protection lies in remembering that, as Schopenhauer would say, the morality of action is in the intention, not in conformity to external rules or social approval. Ethical authenticity comes from within, not from the court of others' opinion. The fifth toxic type that Schopenhauer warns us to avoid is the vitality vampire, the eternally unsatisfied who drains the vital energy of those around them. For Schopenhauer, boredom is not a mere passing discomfort, but the other fundamental pole of human suffering. Life oscillates like a pendulum, back and forth, between pain and boredom. When we are not actively suffering, we fall into the emptiness of boredom, and it is from this abyss that the vitality vampire constantly flees, using others as an escape. This type embodies the incessant pursuit of the will for new objects of desire, the constant escape from inner emptiness. It is the human manifestation of that metaphysical force that is never satisfied, that always wants more, that cannot find peace in itself. You recognize the vitality vampire by their fundamental inability to be alone. Silence terrifies them. Introspection terrifies them. They constantly need external stimuli, attention, drama, conflict, entertainment, anything that fills the void they feel when confronted with themselves. Their demands for attention are insatiable. Each conversation is monopolized, each situation transformed into their personal drama. If you don't respond immediately to their message, something terrible must have happened. If you don't constantly validate their emotions, you are abandoning them. Their crises are always emergencies that require immediate mobilization. The most exhausting thing is that nothing is ever enough. The vitality vampire is a bottomless well of need. Their gratitude is momentary, quickly replaced by new demands. Any solution you offer is quickly discarded in favor of new complaints. The problem is never the problem. The need for attention is the real problem. The impact of living with the vitality vampire is a profound physical and mental exhaustion. You feel constantly responsible for the happiness of someone who is constitutively incapable of being happy. Each interaction leaves you drained, as if your own vital force had been sucked to feed a being that never satiates. The underground man exemplifies aspects of this type when he demonstrates his inability to find contentment in solitude. Despite isolating himself in his underground, he constantly seeks interaction. even if conflictual, just to feel something, to escape the void. His search for confusion and humiliation is preferable to the silence of his own company. In a revealing passage, he confesses, "I could not live without dominating and tyrannizing someone." This is the essence of the vitality vampire, the need to use the other as a source of stimulation, as an escape from one's own inner emptiness. Schopenhauer's warning is clear. Peace can only be found when we learn to be well with ourselves. As he wrote, "Happiness belongs to those who are sufficient for themselves." He offered 3 paths to transcend the cycle of insatiable will: philosophical introspection, aesthetic contemplation, and genuine compassion. Faced with the vitality vampire, protection lies in strengthening our ability to be alone, to find value in quietness, to cultivate what Schopenhauer called autarky, the self-sufficiency of the soul that does not depend on constant external stimuli to find meaning. The 6th and final toxic type that Schopenhauer warns us to avoid is the argumentative dogmatic, one who positions himself as the absolute owner of truth. Schopenhauer dedicated an entire treatise, The Art of Being Right, to the analysis of stratagems used in debates, not to seek truth, but to win arguments at any. He was painfully aware of human intellectual vanity, of the difficulty in admitting error, of the stubborn attachment to one's intellectual ego. It is easier for the soul to leave the body than for a preconceived idea to leave the head, he observed with irony. The argumentative dogmatic is not interested in dialogue, only in monologue disguised as conversation, does not seek mutual understanding, but intellectual surrender. You recognize this type by their compulsive need to always be right. Each conversation, no matter how trivial, transforms into debate. Each disagreement, however minor, is treated as a personal affront that demands immediate refutation. There is no space for nuance, for maybe, for alternative perspectives. The most exasperating characteristic of the argumentative dogmatic is that they don't listen, they just wait for their turn to speak. The words of others are mere obstacles to be overcome, not contributions to be considered. Their mind is busy formulating counter-arguments while you are still in the middle of your exposition. They employ the entire arsenal of stratagems that Schopenhauer catalogued, generalizing from particular cases, distorting others' arguments to facilitate their refutation, changing the topic when cornered, appealing to authority when it suits them, and challenging it when it doesn't, and worse, making personal what should be intellectual. The impact of living with the argumentative dogmatic is a profound existential frustration. Authentic communication becomes impossible. You feel constantly silenced, your ideas devalued before even being fully expressed. The wear of trying to genuinely dialogue with someone who just wants to win makes you eventually give up. The underground man, in his long internal monologues, demonstrates aspects of this dogmatism. He formulates arguments against imaginary adversaries, refutes objections that no one has made, builds hermetic thought systems where he always emerges victorious. His hypertrophied consciousness makes him incapable of genuine dialogue. He is always one step beyond, refuting not just what was said, but what could be said. In a revealing passage, he admits, "I argued with myself and ended up convinced that it was indeed so, and could not be otherwise." This is the essence of the argumentative dogmatic, the unshakable certainty that not only are they right, but that they could not be wrong. Schopenhauer's warning is surprisingly pragmatic. In trivial matters, he advises giving reason to preserve one's own peace, saving energy for intellectual battles that really matter. As he wrote ironically, "If you want to win, pretend to be an idiot and speak with an intelligent man. He will give you reason just to not waste time." More deeply, Schopenhauer reminds us of the fundamental difference between seeking truth and seeking victory in an argument. The first is a noble philosophical endeavor, the second, mere vanity. Faced with the argumentative dogmatic, wisdom lies in recognizing when genuine dialogue is impossible, and, as the philosopher would say, going your way in silence. Arthur Schopenhauer and the underground man, each in his own way, invite us to a profound examination of our relationships and ourselves. Recognizing these toxic archetypes is an act of psychic self-defense. Throughout this journey, we've seen how the manifestations of unbridled will materialize in the 6 types we should avoid. The inflexible egoist, who transforms everything into an extension of himself. The resentful envious, whose gaze corrodes any joy. The unrealistic optimist, who denies the depth of suffering. The judging moralist, who uses virtue as a weapon. The vitality vampire, always hungry for attention. And the argumentative dogmatic, incapable of genuine dialogue. But perhaps the most valuable insight is not just identifying these people in our lives, but recognizing when we ourselves manifest these patterns. As the Underground Man shows us, the line between being a victim and a perpetrator of toxicity is thin and easily crossed when we lose self-awareness. Remember, Schopenhauer's philosophy, although pessimistic, points to compassion, art, and introspection as refuges. True freedom begins when we disentangle ourselves from others' projections and face our own shadow. Schopenhauer teaches us that inner peace does not depend on favorable external circumstances, but on an internal attitude cultivated through wisdom. As he wrote, most of the afflictions we suffer could be avoided if we knew how to act prudently and correctly. This wisdom includes knowing who to keep close and whom to keep at a distance. Sometimes, the most compassionate act we can perform, both for ourselves and for others, is to establish clear boundaries, not out of vengeance or resentment, but out of a deep respect for one's own psychic integrity. Life is too short to be consumed by relationships that drain our vitality instead of nurturing it. As Schopenhauer would say, each day is a little life, each awakening a little birth, each new morning a little youth. How we choose to spend these little lives matters deeply. Now honestly tell me, which of these types have you encountered the most? Leave your comment. Your journey of self-knowledge can inspire all of us. Remember that recognizing our own capacity for toxicity is not a cause for shame, but the first step towards transformation. Dostoevsky showed us that even from the darkest underground of the human soul, it is still possible to write, create, and perhaps find redemption. Also share how you have established healthy boundaries in your relationships. What strategies worked for you? What insights changed your way of navigating the social labyrinth we all inhabit? Your experience may be exactly what someone at this moment needs to hear. Continue this journey. Subscribe to the channel if you liked it. Give your like. Let's together learn and deepen more and more in the wisdom of the great philosophers and how it can transform our lives today.